and welcome to Collegiate Esports 101 Restart. Today, we'll be talking about how to get back into the collegiate esports scene right after the pandemic and discussing some of the challenges that college leaders might be facing and how to overcome them. And we're going to be getting advice from some pretty impressive college leaders themselves or recent college leaders. We'll hear about their experiences and what they might do in this situation. I totally always forget to introduce myself, but my name is Dragon. I'm the East Region Coordinator for Uconnect Esports. I will now let all the other panelists introduce themselves. Rachel, if you want to get us started.
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. My name is Rachel. I actually just graduated from Carnegie Mellon University based in Pittsburgh, where I was the president of our esports club for 2 years, and I'm the current HR operations intern at TikTok.
Hey guys, I'm Paul. I work for NV Gaming. I graduated from Texas A&M University a couple years ago. I was the esports club president over there for about a year. And yeah, now I'm working in esports, work on the marketing team for NV Gaming, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Justin. I'm the co-founder of AcadArena, so we're building campus gaming across Southeast Asia, and I'm also a rising senior at the University of Washington, where I was the president a couple of years ago.
Awesome. Before we get into questions for the audience, thanks again for joining us. And if at any point you guys have any Q&A questions, please drop them in the Twitch chat. We'll get to them at the end when we start Q&A. If you guys are ready, I'm going to get into the first topic. So in non-pandemic times, one of the greatest challenges that college clubs kind of faced was in kind of how to pass knowledge from one leader to the next. And kind of ensuring that long-term success. However, with the advent of COVID, this process may have become even more difficult as, maybe 2 generations of presidents went through without doing live events. So I guess the first question is, what would you recommend the incoming generation of college leaders to do to access that sort of past experience and knowledge or relearn how to navigate these live functions?
I guess I can start. I would say the one nice thing about, I guess, everything being online is you have accessibility to literally anywhere. I think one thing you can do now, especially because people are kind of always online, is you can definitely reach out to your alumni very easily and ask them for advice. Like we have a channel where we post like all of the alumni, that might be working in esports or gaming. We had that on our Discord channel, and most of those people were in the Discord, so you could always just reach out and ask your questions. I'm still in my club's Discord, just finishing up my term as president. So, I definitely expect that the new people will reach out to me, whether it's, texting me on Discord or whatever, so that they can access those resources. And also just, we made sure that someone who has actually gotten to experience live events was still on our esports board. So there was someone who knew what it used to be before COVID is around. And we have all documents and resources within like our club Google Drive that they can access to see, okay, well, how did they do this, 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, I would echo that and say that just being everybody's super accessible online now. I think I'm always on Discord, and even my phone is always blowing up and super accessible there. So like, don't be afraid to ask questions through Discord. I know I've graduated a few years ago now, but I've maintained a pretty good relationship with the club there at A&M. And I mean, I actually encourage them to ask questions whenever. And the past couple presidents have been super great about just open communication and not hesitant to reach out. So I think if you're a club leader, don't be nervous or afraid to just ask a bunch of questions, and happy to go through that. And I think making time for a transition period, for the next wave of students is really important for a club leader to do, especially a president or high-ranking officer. Something that I don't think we were able to do, but is really important, is just helping the new leadership coax into their role and get kind of acquainted with what they're supposed to do. Because if you just kind of, one semester you're there, and then the next semester, the new guy's the president or girl's the president, it's kind of a big change. So you should definitely take a semester or some time to walk them through it, and almost like a shadowing, I guess. so that way they're not just jumping into it. But yeah, I think to echo Rachel, right, just like everyone's super accessible online through Discord. It's there's a ton of resources online, so it should be pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to Paul and Rachel's points, like, especially on the part of like Discord making things super accessible, is that I, especially for like the schools that don't have like a long lasting esports club, like especially the newer schools, like don't like I think they shouldn't be afraid to like reach out to people, to leaders from other schools or to alumni from other schools, because at the end of the day, like all collegiate leaders can kind of like relate towards this experience, right? The experience of like growing a community and growing a club. And for most of the part, I think like most collegiate leaders are always down to help each other out too.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about Collegiate, right, Justin, is everybody's starts to get to know each other and super happy to help each other. When I was in school, that was definitely the best part, was meeting other presidents and learning from them, trying to collaborate and do things. That was always really fun.
Yeah, everyone shares the same, like, like everyone knows the highs, everyone knows the struggles. So it's all like everyone, kind of can kind of relate to all of this.
Definitely you can learn so much from your peers and everything like that, so it's a really good point to bring up.
For sure. I think that's a perfect spot to transition to, I guess, the next question. So, reaching out to college leaders is one thing, but then reaching out to industry leaders is a completely different one. And, the esports, I guess, bubble is still relatively small, especially within the collegiate esports scene. So who would you guys recommend college leaders, especially the newer ones, reach out to? And how would they do so?
I guess it's like, what's the collegiate leader trying to accomplish by reaching out to, or like with who they're reaching out to, right? If they're trying to learn about other collegiate clubs, reach out to other collegiate leaders. If they're trying to learn how to get a job in esports, reach out to the people that graduated a few years ago and are working in esports and entertainment. But I think like before you reach out, you should have an agenda and a goal and a kind of a brief spiel of what you're going to ask for, and what you're expecting and hoping, and why you're reaching out. I get a ton of, this is not to flatter, but a ton of messages on LinkedIn and stuff, and it's a lot of them are sometimes it's with little direction. But when I see someone come in and say, hey, like I'm a student leader, I'm curious about what you did in college esports and how you got there. 3 short sentences, super to the point, is a super easy thing to respond to and take a 15 or 30-minute call to. So don't know if that touches the question perfectly, but that's I think if anyone's doing any reaching out, that's kind of how I would direct the reaching out.
Yeah, I think most people would. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No, you can go.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that I think most people are always down to help, but the best way to get people to help is to be clear on how you need help so that they know how to help you almost immediately.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. People aren't mind readers. You can't expect them to you can't even expect them to ask you, oh, what do you need help with? You have to be the one to bring that forward and to go to them with exactly what you need help with. Otherwise, I think they might just not see it as a valuable use of their time if they have to spend all this time getting that information out of you to even start with. People are busy at the end of the day. They definitely do want to help you, but you have to make it easy for them. So I would definitely, know what you need help with. If you just want to pick their brain, there's definitely people within the industry that I think are super interesting, and I definitely want to understand more about their thought process. So a lot of the times I'll just set up a meeting with them and be like, hey, so what are your thoughts on this? Or, what are you thinking about this? And I find it super valuable for me. And also, sometimes they even bounce ideas off of me, and then it's also valuable for them. So, it's a two-way street, and you can give and take with everyone you speak with.
Awesome. I kind of wanted to go back a little bit and talk a little bit more about the transition period itself. So Rachel, I know you brought up that CMU has a catalog of resources for incoming leaders. So, if you've documented what you guys do, and obviously this is especially important, especially with documentation of how to do live events. Paul, you mentioned having a specific transition period. Can you guys just elaborate a little bit more about what you guys did during your times as a college leader, and I guess the importance of those two things?
Yeah, sure. First, I will say, honestly, I even could have done the transition a lot better. Just given how hectic my last semester was with starting a new job and everything like that. But I would say, we did have all these documents, like forms, spreadsheets of like when we did tabling to advertise our events. Like people don't know what tabling is as much anymore because you're not sitting on campus anymore, nor do we have live events that we're asking people to show up to. But I would definitely say, set up that time where you can, we did set up time to bring in all of our new officers so they had some exposure to all the old officers, and we could run them through everything and get them used to everything before everyone kind of left. Especially the board that I was on was mainly people who also graduated this year, so it was a huge change. So we wanted to make sure everyone was familiar, and we connected everyone with, okay, here's your senior officer who is doing the role that you're about to enter into. Be sure to meet with them. Make sure you get all the knowledge you can from them before they leave, and also establishing those connections so they know who directly to reach out to. Because even though I was president, like the finance officer is going to know a lot more about the ins and outs of finance than I might. So connecting those with the right new officers with the right people was super important, and having a semester long to do that was definitely a really good move that we did.
Yeah, I think to echo basically exactly what Rachel said is we also had junior officers just on top of the senior officers, and the junior officers a lot of the times would shadow the more senior ones and just kind of get a grip on what the responsibility was, and the next year semester they'd move up and take on that role. So yeah, I think any kind of window to get a lens into what you would be doing next in your next role is really important, and jumping straight into it is tough in any job. So yeah.
Awesome. We're gonna move on to topic 2. And we're going to kind of discuss revenue and how clubs can be sustainable in the long term. So, a lot of colleges throughout the pandemic have lost a lot of money, and so they're going under a lot of budget cuts. And this was pre-pandemic as well, but esports and gaming clubs usually didn't get a lot of support from their universities. And so sometimes it was hard to get funding for their events, to build out their communities and whatnot. And so if organizations are unable to garner university support, how do you think student leaders can go about independently funding their events and organization?
Yeah, okay, I can start with this. So to start, we were a really spoiled club. CMU has a really, really great way of supporting clubs. It's like not hard at all to be university recognized. I think you have to like fill out a form and like why your club is different from all existing clubs, and then get like 10 people to sign it, and then you're boom, you're a club, and you have access to the club budget. And CMU has, I think, like just over $2 million of club budget that they invest in their clubs every single year. It's a small activity fee. Everyone has to pay it, all the students and I think grad students as well. And then it just goes into this big fund, and then that gets redistributed to clubs. So since we actually had a number of members in our club, and we pulled a lot to our events, we got between $3,000 and $4,000 every year that we basically could spend on whatever. Like food, prizes. They were like, we don't really care. And we were like, okay, like we did a rock, paper, scissors tournament for a Nintendo Switch, and we just gave away a Switch because we just had money, which is not the norm. And I can say, but I like, as a freshman, the 2 previous presidents both forgot to file for funding. So we didn't have any money that year. And we made do, I think, taking advantage of a lot of like programs out there, like we had TESPA that provided us prizes at the time, so definitely taking advantage of that. We made people pay for pizza. It was rough, but we basically were like $5 and all you can eat, and then we just took all those $5 and just bought a ton of I think it was like Domino's, like medium pizzas. You could get like them for like $6 each, so we were like, okay, we're just gonna make this work. I think there's definitely ways to get creative. And I also know some other clubs out there, they like partner with local businesses. If there's like a local pizza place near your campus, you can be like, hey, like if you give us pizza for, a discount or even for free, we'll work it in, we'll advertise for you, stuff like that. So there is definitely ways around it when you don't have money, and you can get creative. But I mean, money always does help, and you can do a lot of cool things, but not every university supports that. And I definitely know we were a spoiled club from asking around with other leaders.
Yeah, UW was a pretty spoiled club too. I would say as well. Like we didn't necessarily have like the budgets to spend on different things, but the university did always have like a budget to subsidize venue costs, to subsidize special guest costs, and like even though we couldn't like spend that on a lot of like the stuff that does like make the event run, like like labor, printables, decor, etc. Like that did help a lot of things. So the thing how, or like the way how WGA really monetized in the past was we were a really live event driven org. So we generated money in the same way a lot of expos do. So sponsorships, artist alley fees, entrance fees, guest fees. And yeah, that's like, I think like that's one of like the things that kind of really like drove the growth of our clubs, because like we kind of like angled ourselves as a very like event centric / like consumer events kind of club. And yeah, like I would say we were relatively spoiled there too. So, big shout outs to the UW student affairs team for that one.
Yeah, man, I feel like I went to the wrong school now. Just kidding. But yeah, A&M a little bit different. Gigantic school, but because it's so big, I think there's so many different clubs, it's a bit probably tougher to get funding. I think you do get a bit for being a club, and you get all the school resources and whatnot. But when I was there, you do have to be pretty scrappy with how you can make revenue and kind of support the club, even on top of a lot of the discounts you get from renting rooms and things like that. So our typical strategy was always something along the lines of scheduled profit shares throughout the semester with different local businesses like pizza places or breakfast places. Wherever you get a portion of the revenue that comes in from your group, and honestly, you just stand at the door and say, can you please say A&M Esports at the front when you go by, and people will probably do it for you, and it's free money. So profit shares are a really good one. Membership dues are a pretty straightforward way to make sure that you at least have some funding up front. Yeah, I don't think everybody needs to pay a membership due, but you can definitely incentivize people by saying if you pay for your dues up front, you get free access to the 3 lands that we're going to do next year, later this semester. Otherwise, it's going to be $20 versus like the 40 you would have spent up front to save money, something like that. And then the other one, like Justin was echoing, is off of our live events. So at A&M, we would host around 3 to 4 lands a year, charge around $25 per space, and with a club of 300 to 500 people every year, you could, if everybody came out at least once, you'd monetize pretty well off of a single event. So as tough as it is, there are ways to make it through. And I mean, I think outside of university support, there's a lot of third-party support in the form of organizations, esports orgs like TESPA, that I know is not really around anymore, but a lot of other esports teams like EG and Cloud9 and even Envy here, supporting a lot of collegiate academics and stuff like that. So I think honestly, just look around and you might find more funding than you think. It just takes a few Google searches, but it's definitely out there. And frankly, alumni is also probably a pretty big supporter for A&M from what I understand. So your alumni maybe even be willing to pitch in to help out your club as well. So just my thoughts. Yeah.
Paul, I'm gonna kind of take what you just said and ask you guys to build a little bit upon it. So you work for Envy, obviously, and you talked about how Envy is kind of supporting collegiate things. And there's a lot of companies like MSI and like Twitch Student and Corsair and Rebel. I'm just gonna shout out all of them. They all do sort of like branding opportunities. If you're having a large event, they'll give out pricing. I mean, just like a connection with that. I guess, what are your guys' advice for clubs, especially the newer ones who might not know how to make like pitches or presentation decks? Like, what do you guys think they should do? And Paul, you can get us started because I think you might have the most experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, it's going to kind of echo my sentiment earlier about clear communication when you're going to a big group or organization. Is just clean presentations that are direct with what you need and what you can provide back. Envy Gaming is a company, and we have the job of entertaining and engaging our audience. And at the bottom line, our job is to make fans and then eventually monetize them and all that stuff. So if a university can come to me and tell me like, hey, I've got a club of 1,000 kids, and they'll all sign up for your membership club, and then in return, just send us a box of merch and support us throughout the semester with a few things, like that's a really easy transaction to make. And if I can show that our bottom line is affected in a beneficial way, and I can make some sacrifices or calls on my end to like support the club in a way that's scalable, and doesn't necessarily show like favoritism to a certain university or anything, those are really doable things. Where as everybody's said here, we're all pretty busy people. So the more that a person can come and say like, hey, like this is what I want to do for you, if you can help me with this, makes it pretty easy to say yes or no. And if it's a no, how can we scale it down or scale it up, depending on the circumstances. But yeah, I mean, PowerPoint presentations are important when you send them over. Don't put too many words in them. And honestly, if you just send over a deck, it's probably better to try and schedule 15 minutes to talk over it too. But yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, and I would also add there. Sorry.
You go.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Just
no,
to build
you
off.
got it.
Okay. I would say numbers is super important. Like at the end of the day, if you're like, we're a big club, okay, does that mean 100? Does that mean 20? Does that mean 1,000? Like, what does that mean? Like having those really quantitative statistics is really important, because at the end of the day, like the person you're talking to might even have to like pitch it to their boss or even higher to get that approval. So if you give them the numbers already up front, it can save their time if they're like, this is not the numbers that we need to see, or it makes their job easy because now they can just rip those numbers out and just go send it off to their boss and be like, look how big these numbers are. Like we can get all of these, opportunities here. So definitely like focus really hard on those numbers and any of those key achievements, and make sure that those like get highlighted in your deck, like followers on social media or event attendees or active participants, stuff like that. It's definitely really good to highlight.
Yeah, and I was gonna say something similar to Rachel, but just to add on to that one, also make it so that the person you're talking to doesn't have to do a lot of digging, because at the end of the day, like people are busy. So make sure that make sure that they don't have to like search up scroll through like your social media feeds, or like have to like go to some random part of your website just to find key information.
Yeah. And then we're gonna move on to the third topic, which is kind of building out your club population. So kind of what Rachel just talked about, numbers and quantitative data are key. And you can obviously say your club's big, but if you have the numbers to back it up, it makes it a lot easier to reach out to sponsors and find support that way. And so with many students coming back to campus for maybe the first time, whether they be freshmen or juniors, and having to reacclimate to the club, to the college environment culture, what do you guys think are some of the most effective ways to bring students in? And what are some of the methods and techniques organizations can use to attract the incoming student population?
I would say know your audience, first of all, because every school operates differently. If your club is really active, like engaging in your Twitter, like go there. If they're not, maybe don't use that as heavily. Like for me, I know that at CMU, it's a bunch of nerds that all probably game and are pretty introverted. So my way of doing it was like at Club Fizz, for example, I would just point to someone and go, do you play video games? Do you want free stuff? And then they'd kind of panic. And I mean, they'd say yes. They'd be like, yeah, I do play video games. And then I'd pull them over with the free stuff, and then I'd get them to sign up. And just doing that method and just knowing that was like roughly how everyone was going to react, I got like over 150 signups in one club fair. So I would say definitely know your audience, and then from there you can kind of figure out your best method of how to attack that and how to get people in.
Yeah, I think knowing your audience, right, and like knowing what your school does to support clubs being found, I think A&M is a good example where the first week is, I think it's Gig'em Week now. It used to be Howdy Week when I was there. But in that week, I think the last day, all of the clubs get out into the student center, which is gigantic, and there are hundreds of clubs there, just like for all these thousands and thousands of students that will walk by and see your club. And it is the best place to be, because every time we're there, hundreds of kids walk by and see, oh, there's a esports and gaming club here. I'll take the flyer and sign up and get into the Discord and all that. And that was, just knowing like what the school schedule is, like when things are happening and where you should be as a club. It's really just staying informed and organized. But knowing that, I mean, that's super important. And just having the club live where it needs to live, like obviously on Discord, and having like a Reddit thread, or and having a social presence on Twitter and Instagram so people can find you. All those things are really important, because you got to know where your audience is, and where they'll be. And if you can at least be there, they'll see you and more likely to engage. So yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, like I think a lot of like college gaming clubs should also be more open towards working with like a lot of like the non-gaming clubs or gaming adjacent clubs in their school. Because at the end of the day, like a lot of these clubs also have people who play video games or people who follow esports, and maybe doing like a lot of collab events like with pen and paper clubs, comic book clubs, etc., can really help spread out the reach of your club in general. And I guess like what Paul, Rachel, and I are basically saying is that know the meta of your school.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that, knowing the meta. I guess kind of going along with the meta. So, with I guess all schools going online and a lot of clubs having to transition to having only an online presence, so having Discord meetings or like online tournaments. Do you guys think that that gaming clubs should transition to completely in person again, or try to maintain that hybrid sort of style, even if it might mean more work?
I think it's in my head, it's pretty straightforward, right? You should probably echo what your school is doing. If your school is going totally online, probably can't be hosting in-person events. You might just get in trouble for that. Honestly, I'm dying for in-person events to just become normal again, and I would love that. But if the campus is just doing a total online thing, then it's just irresponsible, maybe. With hybrid, I think it's know your audience, like we've kind of said here. If your student body is ready to do that, make sure you have the precautions in place to take care of them and do it responsibly. But if they're asking for it, and you're comfortable doing it, I mean, you should probably try and provide. So knowing your audience and probably a mix of both would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I would say definitely follow the rules of the school. Like at the bare minimum, please do not host events if it's against safety guidelines, if it's against school guidelines. Like even like everyone's itching for it, but like don't do it. And then yeah, I think realistically, I would say probably a lot of esports clubs were already doing hybrid things, because maybe your teams in various leagues and stuff, they were playing online. Maybe you didn't have a gaming facility and they were all playing from their house, or if you hosted a tournament, that probably format still followed. So I think staying hybrid can work. And I mean, yeah, people are itching to go back in person, and you can leverage that once it's safe to do so, and potentially have really, really great turnout for your event, because people want to go back to events. People want to go back to normal. But yeah, I would say just know your school, know the rules, and be safe doing so, and put a lot of time and thought behind your decision, and it should work out.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing as both, but at the same time, like, it really depends on a school per school basis. Like there are schools that are going to be like, obviously, like we're going to assume that we're going to be in a world where live events are viable again, right? But in that world, even then, I think it's always good for a club to always like have some sort of digital presence, just because it allows you to reach much more than you can than usual. But at the same time, like you should know your school if your school's actually like receptive to that kind of stuff. Because like one thing that like we learned at UW, or at least one thing that was a thing when we were doing gaming events, was that people didn't really like online stuff at UW even before the pandemic. So that's kind of like the reason why a lot of like the online events that a lot of the clubs are doing in general, not just the gaming clubs at UW, but just clubs in general at UW, just don't do well because we're not an online or a school that doesn't really like respond to online events, and not many people are that active on social media either at our school. So I think it's all about like just reading the meta at your school and adapting to that.
Awesome. Could you guys personally let me know what you think the most challenging thing about people having to restart their organization will be, or just running a club generally, and how you would overcome that challenge? Good
I
question.
would say the hardest thing is probably just that transition of going back to normal, because once you have the option of in-person events, like our club, for example, and I know this is not the case for most clubs, but CMU Esports has been around since 2008. It was formed as a StarCraft 2 only club and grew from there. So we have a very long history, and it was very like routine. Like everyone knew, okay, this is how events are run. So it was really easy to do that transition because, okay, like you have people who have been on the officer board for like 2-3 years. They've been to all the events. They go pretty similarly. Sure, you have some changes and some new things here and there, but it's not hard to get started again because it's like, okay, well, we do our 3 LANs in the spring, we do our 3 LANs in the fall, and they run pretty similarly. But now you have people who have not had in-person experience either at all or in a while. So I think the hardest thing is just going to be setting that kind of groundwork of the possibility of in-person again when you have such a huge chunk of the student body who has never experienced that before.
Yeah, I don't think I have a super good answer to this question, but I think just getting out of the COVID state and going back to normal, I think is going to be different, right, in a nutshell. And it's something that no one's really had to do before. So whoever is kind of leading the club at that moment, it's going to be a funny transition, and hopefully it goes smoothly. But I think that itself, right, and that kind of encompasses what I think everyone's going to say at a high level is just it's going back to normal is going to be interesting at the very least.
Yeah, and there's I think like another challenge is going to be like the hesitation people are going to have towards, well, the understandable hesitation a lot of people on campuses are going to have towards like going to social events or going to social spaces, like especially as like someone, or like especially if you're like someone in a campus with like 50,000, 60,000 people, like you're understandably going to be like, you're going to try to play it safe, and you're not going to try to be in a space with like 100 different people at once all playing different video games. Like part of you is always going to like be like like scared, not really scared, but like part of you is really going to be careful for most of the part, and that's really understandable. So I feel like a big challenge that a lot of leaders are going to have to deal with is like adapting to the hesitation, like making event setups with like social distancing, stuff like that, and so that like to ensure the safety of everyone on campuses.
Awesome. Before we start Q&A, I'm going to start that in about 7 minutes for the audience in case you guys have any questions. I have some more personalized questions for each of you about, I guess, what you guys have been doing. I stalked your LinkedIn, basically. So, Rachel, I'll start with you. You brought it up already, but you founded ICGN in the kind of response to COVID-19. And I kind of wanted to get your take on what you think the organizations of impact had on club leaders. And then I guess what resources you accessed, and now what are your plans for the future as clubs might go back to in-person, maybe not have to rely on you guys as heavily?
Well, so I'm actually not with ICG anymore, but I was there for 3 months back when I started it, March of 2020. I would say one thing that it did do was, I think it really broke down the walls of like, there was some like collaboration between clubs, but I think not to the scale of across the whole US and even a bit internationally. I think, you see a lot of California schools collaborating and making events, but before that, you didn't have as much of a centralized place. And I think at that moment, I realized, hey, like, I hate that I can't do events anymore. Like I feel like kind of helpless. I don't feel in control. So like we might as well take back that control and build our own thing. And yeah, so I think it really helped kind of unite clubs all over. And I think because of that, like there's so many people that I'm connected with that like I probably would have never spoken to otherwise, like had no reason to even connect with that school or anything like that. So I think it really helped create a lot of good networking opportunities and at the very base level, just friendships. Like there are people that I'm still friends with because of that and who are still friends with each other and like whole groups of friends that like seemingly came together because of ICGN, which I think was really cool. And I think that in and of itself, building that network was the access to resources that people could have. Because I think, and you even see this in like businesses, like separate teams may all be doing the same thing. And then if they're not in like talking to each other, it can be really inefficient. So now that you have this place where all different club leaders can talk to each other, at this point, people have figured out, okay, this doesn't work or this failed or stuff like that. And being able to now meet with those people and talk to them, I think is just a great resource to help all clubs build each other up.
Awesome. Justin, I guess your question's probably the closest to Rachel's. But first, I wanted to say it's super impressive that you're a senior and you're like already founding a whole company tackling the collegiate space in Southeastern Asia. But as an organization that was founded kind of near the start of the pandemic, I guess what challenges have you faced transitioning from that sort of 1 year of maybe being able to do in person to a 1 year of completely online? How has that affected your business? How has that affected you as a person? What challenges did you face?
Yeah, I think it's less so a challenge for us, but more so like what we do is like we really help a lot of clubs and a lot of schools get started with their esports programs at their school. But I think like one of the key differences that a lot of like clubs here in like C had to deal with was that they started online. Like because like campus gaming in Southeast Asia is like really new. Like it only became a thing or like a thing that's like pretty common like last year or last year. So the majority of clubs here, especially in the Philippines, all started during the pandemic. And given that they had no knowledge base to work off of, they had no live events to meet each other with, they had no like student population to actually like advertise to. Like it's a lot of these like factors that compounded that, we had to like work with them and guide them towards that. I'm really proud for a lot of our students for them, facing that. So, like at least like how a lot of like the students here, at least in the Philippines, dealt with it is similar to how, like the ICGN people did it. A lot of the college leaders of the same generation all banded together. People across different universities all shared information with one another within our network. And then, at the end of the day, like it's not the ideal scenario, but a lot of the clubs really did grow really well during the pandemic. And it's gonna be a nice story to tell of how so many people from so many different universities came together to create communities in their school, even in a time where everyone's like apart.
And then Paul, your last but not least. So I saw that you created, I guess you convinced Texas A&M to create brand activations, yeah, and I guess one of your football stadiums. And then you also personally created an inaugural tournament series with 500 plus people. I wanted to dig into your expertise of how to talk to your university about seeking that sort of esports support, and then B, how to create like an event of that scale and planning all those details and convincing all those people to come to it.
Yeah. So I'll start with B because I think I can go a little shorter and it's a little easier. I have a bunch of tournament like operations background because I played fighting games growing up. And in college, that was my spiel. I was a Super Smash Bros. Melee player, played Fox. I know character loses to Marth all the time. So I ran a bunch of weeklies and one day I was just like, well, what if we just ran a really big tournament in one day? And I just frankly just do the math and say if it's going to cost me $2,000 to rent out of this ballroom, and I'm selling tickets for $50 a person, how many people do I need to get to cover my to cover my bases and costs and just make a profit for all the work I do. If you can answer that question and you can run a tournament and you have people that want to play fighting games or go to an event in your city, I'm pretty confident, and you have a small team of maybe 2 or 3 people, because I did not do that alone. I'm pretty confident that anyone could run an event as long as they kind of just have the grit and the understanding and know how to run a P&L. So simple math and being able to run events, I think, will get you a long way, to say the least. But the other question was, how do you convince the school to get more involved in esports and all that? Honestly, A&M is a gigantic school, right? So there's a ton of staff, and I knew at some point, somewhere, some staff member or faculty would support esports and want to do something with it. So I cold emailed a ton of people. I cold emailed our CRO at A&M. Actually, I cold emailed the entire A&M athletics C-level department, I think, from their CEO to their CFO to all those people. I emailed a bunch of different staff or department heads at different departments, and I just said, hey, all separately. And I said, this is what esports is. This is what our club is doing. This is what I think the state of esports as an entertainment business is, and this is what other colleges are doing. I think there's room for us to get involved and do something. And that very short and direct conversation and email I sent, resulted in me being able to talk to the CFO and then the CRO over at athletics and then their VP of Marcom, and they listened, and we did some stuff. And so it's really about, planting a seed in their head and direct communication and saying, like, this is what I think is possible, and following through, but being honest with what you're saying. You shouldn't go to your university and say you can make $1 million in esports, as a college, because you probably can't. That's going to be tough. But be realistic and say that this is like something good for the university, because it's going to draw more people to come into the university in the next year, because esports is a way to get people to pick your school over another one, right? So understand what they want out of it, and be honest and be direct in your communication. That's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Awesome. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we jump into Q&A? Cool. Well, the first question is going to be, what are the important statistics and metrics to track that you should approach sponsors with?
Total club size, active club members, social following, and how often you can tweet and all that stuff. I think just basic social is pretty important.
Yeah, I would agree. Just know how big your club is, whether that's, I don't know, Discord members, Facebook group members. I don't know if people still use Facebook groups. We do at CMU. Twitter, post metrics like impressions, engagement, all that good stuff is probably what they're going to end up caring about in the end.
Yeah, and I think another cool thing to add as well is growth trajectory. So you're especially if one of the newer clubs as well, show that this is where you were 2 to 3 months ago, and then this is where you are now. And especially if your numbers aren't that great yet, showing that you have a positive growth trajectory is one way of getting a lot of support early on too.
Yeah, and then one thing we actually talked about this at work the other day, but a lot of companies and esports orgs will sell based off of total following and impressions and that you can generate and all that stuff. When a club is trying to do that, at a smaller scale, it's still really tough to make sponsorship dollars. But something you can do that bigger companies can't is give a really authentic experience with the company's products. Like, for example, Corsair, to all 300 of the students that are part of that club at a LAN or something. If you can say, I'm going to host this LAN event and set up this PC with Corsair peripherals, and 100 students are going to walk by and play on it. A lot of companies can't say that 100 people are going to walk by and get some hand time with this Corsair mouse and demo it and all that stuff. That's a way better story to tell than I'm going to tweet and it's going to get this many likes. So that's one thing that I think universities have on top of bigger companies that don't have that kind of storytelling reach, if you would. So I would almost, your social metrics are important, but craft a fun story that you can tell about how personal you can get with your students, because that's it's really meaningful to brands more than you could probably imagine. So yeah.
The next question, what can college students that are looking to go into esports as a career do while in school to make them more valuable?
I guess I can start with this one. Right now, like I think a lot of collegiate leaders want to go into the esports industry. So right now, like there's hundreds of collegiate leaders that are like, hey, like I led my club, but like so has a lot of other people. So one thing that you'll hear to stand out is like create your own opportunities. Like I've heard that plenty. And until I actually like made something, I had no idea what that meant. But this goes back to like knowing your audience. Like one thing that I think worked so well with ICGN is like I knew what college students wanted because I was a college student. And I was like, what do I want to see that I think would look cool? And then I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And then I just went and made it. And then in doing so, I had a ton of numbers. I had all of this experience that I put on my resume. I talk about it in like every single interview. Like if people are like, talk about a time you had to work on a team, I'm like, boom. Or talk about like a challenge you face. I'm just like, here's another example. So I think like to stand out, like it really is create your own experience. And that may seem daunting, but if you just go and ask yourself, what do I want to see that doesn't exist right now? That's like a huge jumping off point. And from there, you can just through like hard work, a little insanity, and maybe like a very large lack of sleep, you can make it happen.
Yeah,
Justin,
I think I think like, a lot of people overlook how valuable regular work experience is. Like I think getting into esports right after college is hard. But a year or two at like some agency or a different job to really develop your skill set, and then going into esports is heavily overlooked. And I think, probably more impressive and makes you more valuable, than the other candidate. I think it's tough to get a job especially at a team right out of school or really anywhere regarding that sector. But yeah, I mean, I would, that was kind of the route I took, and it worked out really well. So I think developing your normal skill set and finding what you want to do in esports, I've said this a ton of times to so many people, is really important. You can't just get a job in esports. You kind of got to figure out like, oh, do I like the production side? Do I like the social and marketing side? Am I a seller? Should I go into partnership sales? That you kind of have to have that answer before you go to a team or a company and say, I want to work with you, because then I'm going to ask, what do you want to do? And if you just say everything, that's tough. So yeah.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, it's kind of like the esports industry is kind of like in a phase right now where it's really trying to super professionalize to the point where, in the past, a lot of it was really built on grassroots and like blood, sweat, and tears. And now like the industry's trying to get more people from other industries, people with relevant experience in other industries, to come in and kind of, diversify the scene in terms of experiences, in terms of perspectives, and being able to come in with a background in esports from Collegiate, while also having worked somewhere else, like another industry that esports can learn a lot from, especially like technology, like, like tech startups or like even like advertising firms. Like that's a really big boost. Like a lot of companies really value right now having that non-endemic experience.
And also, one other thing just to build off those other 2 points is that esports is very specific. Like, so coming in knowing what you want to do, like esports is not the same as gaming, and is not the same as tech, and is not the same as entertainment. Like originally I thought, oh, the only path in is esports, but like I don't really follow esports. Like my main game I play is like League, but I don't watch LCS that much. Like if I was to be a team manager, like I wouldn't know who like most of the players are, all this stuff. I just really like gaming. So then I realized, oh, maybe I don't actually mean esports. So, then I went and like worked at like a game company. I worked at Epic Games. And then I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. But I also really like Corsair products. So then I went and worked at Corsair. And then now I'm like, honestly, it doesn't matter. I just like exploring and learning new things. So now I'm at TikTok, which is not super gaming related at all. And I think it's important to realize that I think a lot of people say, oh, I want to go into esports, but they might not actually mean they want to go into esports. They might mean they just really like gaming and they want to go into gaming, or, you know, maybe they want to go into tech, but they want to have that entertainment side. So I think it's really important to know that it is very, very broad what you can do. And to figure out, I guess, like what you want to do first within that broad area and not just focus in on one thing.
Okay, I know we're running a bit out of time, but we have 2 more questions. So for smaller campuses, for example, less than 5,000 students, would showing percentages of the total student population in the club be effective to include in a sponsorship deck?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool metric. And you know, like if you've got I mean, that would be pretty cool if you don't, even with context. And honestly, I think going back to like what we had answered earlier is like if your club is small, I think like telling the story about like the authentic experience you made with a handful of people, even if it's 30, 50, 100, is still really cool. So don't be worried about you know, the quantity necessarily, but if you can, you know, make a really nice qualitative experience for a brand, it's just as good, as long as you recap it well, right? So if you can, you know, get a really fun video of 100 people like walking through and checking out, demoing a product and that kind of stuff, it's meaningful. So numbers aren't everything. It's really about the experience, because if, you know, 5,000 views where people don't really care versus 100 hands-on experiences where, you know, you actually got to touch the mouse or something is, I think, you know, probably way more valuable.
Cool. And then our final question, are there any tips for embracing the growth of mobile gaming?
I've got a buddy. Go ahead, Justin.
Oh yeah, I guess I'll take a stab at this, since like mobile gaming's like the thing here in Southeast Asia right now. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I don't know how much of like difference it is in North America, because mainly that like at least like mobile gaming, like you know, League of Legends Wild Rift, Mobile Legends, Call of Duty Mobile, not exactly that big in the US just yet, but honestly, a lot of like the clubs here, at least here in the Philippines, were also in a similar place where, you know, there was some hesitancy towards you know, like fully accepting mobile games. But at the end of the day, like it's all the same. Like everyone plays video games, everyone plays esports, and at the end of the day, like it's all people just coming together. So I would say like don't treat it differently from any kind of game. It's the same thing. Like obviously there are the different caveats to it, just like how you would treat a League of Legends group at your school differently from like you know, from like Smash Brothers group. But at the end of the day, like they're all gaming groups at your school, and you should do your best to accommodate them.
Yeah, definitely don't isolate groups. Like it's a common thing of like, oh, this game's not a real esport, or like, oh, like I don't know. I feel like you especially hear that around like, I don't know, like Madden or like 2K or like even Fortnite. Like, oh, it's not real. Like at the end of the day, that closed mindset is only going to hinder like the growth of your club. It's going to hinder what you can do, the sponsors you bring in, and it's just going to be detrimental to your club. So I think it's important to be really open-minded, and, you know, mobile gamers are gamers too. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was going to say I have a buddy who would love to answer this question over at NV, because he loves mobile gaming and Wild Rift and is probably playing it right now. Honestly, yeah, exactly what Justin and Rachel said. Don't isolate it. It's still gaming. It's still entertainment. And if someone's making fun of it, you know, it's one, that's kind of rude, and two, a lot of pro teams have professional mobile gaming teams, right? And so you can ask that person, why is it a joke if TSM's fielding a team? You know, that obviously doesn't make sense. So yeah, they kind of gotta, you know, understand where they are, and mobile gaming is really cool and has a pretty awesome future with Wild Rift already being there and all that. So yeah, it's serious and it's there. And when more developers are starting to make their games mobile friendly, I mean, that definitely means something. So yeah, I think North America is a little late on the trend. So, you know, we'll see a change in the next 5 years or so. But yeah.
I
Awesome.
actually think like mobile. Oh
No, go ahead.
yeah, I actually think that mobile gaming is actually going to have a big renaissance or like a big spurt of growth actually in the collegiate space in general, just because of how accessible it is. So compared to like a lot of like different titles where you need consoles, because like I'm from the Smash scene too, like you need consoles, you need PCs, like the beauty about mobile games is that you can actually run events anywhere where there's like 4G or like 5G signal too. So I actually think it'll be something that's going to be pretty massive in schools and campuses when things get back to like normal too. So looking forward to seeing how like especially like Riot, how they're going to like roll out like Collegiate Wild Rift, if that's going to be a thing in North America, or how other developers do that too.
Awesome. And I think with that, we're running a bit over time. So thank you, Rachel, Justin, and Paul for joining me today and sharing all of your experiences and plethora of knowledge and stuff. I think the couple big takeaways I got from it were knowing what the meta are, being quantitative so that sponsors can actually know exactly what they are, and be authentic with people, whether that's with sponsorship, like trying out sponsored products, or dealing with mobile gamers versus console gamers versus PC gamers. And with that, I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you for joining us in Collegiate Esports 101 Restart. Please stay if you're interested in watching the After TESPA panel, which is starting right after this. Thank you.